My topic tonight is what pair wins. It's going to be about pair programming, a little bit of history. I am Keith Callis. I'm a principal consultant at Strategic Data Systems, so I'm wearing the uniform tonight. So the middle part there, I am a Scrum Master. I have done that a couple of places. I use a lot of Agile tools for my engagements with customers. So it's always a different tool for tracking whether you're using extreme programming, Agile, Scrum, Kanban, or whatever. When I'm not doing computers, I basically do some photography, and I am a chef in my kitchen on the weekends. So here's an ad that I throw up. Strategic Data Systems, we're a consulting company in the southeast Ohio. We have offices in Dayton as well as in Sharonville. We cover customers down in Kentucky, downtown Cincinnati, suburbs of Cincinnati, as well as up in Dayton. We are looking for Java developers and .NET developers, but more of that at the break. So pair programming. So I'm going to kind of cover what it is, what the history, where it came from, when it started. Basically, it started a lot farther ago than I thought it did when I did research for this. I have a little slide from Mark Winholz, who was at Cincy Deliver this summer. And so one of his slides really hit home for extreme programming as well as pair programming. And I'm going to share some experiences that I've had. If you guys have done pair programming, you can share if you want. If you don't want to, that's fine. It's all volunteer. So, extreme programming was really formed by Kent Beck when he joined the Chrysler Corporation back in 1996 for a big project, and there was actually two projects. From different places on the webs, I found different lists of names, so I've listed some of them that contributed towards XP. They spent many years using it and refining it so that it got better, got worse, got better over time, but they basically used what they were preaching and they got good results at Chrysler from the different projects that they were on. Some of these names that you see, you'll see them in another slide when we get to something else. And then that is an image of the first book that they wrote for extreme programming. There is a second edition out in 2005. I just don't have that shown. So I'm going to go through what extreme programming is, and you'll probably draw a lot of parallels with what you might be doing these days. So they do a lot of planning in extreme programming. So the planning phase is really to have user stories. I'm not sure what they're teaching, but there's a lot of Post-its on the boards here, and you can actually view one of those with the Post-its is Kanbans. So it's a good example of a Kanban board with the different Post-its. So user stories should be written kind of small, because if they're a huge amount of work, then it's harder to do your release planning. It's harder to actually get the work done in a timely fashion. And really, it's kind of hard on the staff as well, trying to cram a lot of work in a short amount of time, not getting stuff done, and it carries over, week after week, month after month, and then that then becomes a kind of a detrimental to being, it's work and not fun for that process. So part of the planning with the stories is they can take a group of stories and actually do some iteration planning and do small releases. The small releases, some people know that as MVP, minimum viable product. So that you deploy and release a small piece of code, you get it in front of your customers, they can actually provide feedback on that. Part of XP is the management that they did. They don't want to do a lot of management, so they kind of went with an open workspace. So kind of like we're sitting here, only you're all looking at the front, but I've been in places where there's actually been kind of tables facing each other, and you have developers sitting next to each other as well as across from each other. So the open workspace allows for good communications, not only with your pairing partner if you're pairing, but also with someone across the table, or you might hear something sitting at that table that someone is saying over there, and it makes sense for you to go, hey, I'm going to go over and ask a question or get some more information because it's pertinent to what I'm doing. So it's good communications across the team, multiple teams, if you got multiple teams sitting together. The sustainable pace, this is what they call no overtime. Basically, be good to the staff. Don't make them work 45 hours a week, 50 hours a week, because you get burned out. So the sustainable pace is, let's do the right number of stories with the right points, with the right staff. Sometimes teams expand and they contract. So when your teams kind of expand, you got more people, you can do more points, more stories. But part of that is those new team members that expanded may not know enough information to be really efficient at getting the work done in a timely fashion. So you may have more people, but your stories may stay the same for a couple of days, a week or so, until people get up to speed with the knowledge on the application that you're working on. So meetings. I've always enjoyed the last, 5, 6 years because I don't go and sit in meetings anymore. Main meetings I have are stand-up meetings. Some places there's 2 stand-up meetings, there's a huge group, and that may last 4 minutes, and then we break out into individual teams. They will have their individual stand-ups. That may take 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then it's basically off to work with a pairing partner, get the work done, and be productive for the day. The other meeting is the bottom item about fixing extreme programming via the retros. So the only other meetings that I kind of enjoy are the retros at the end of a sprint, whether that's every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks. One place I was at, it was every Friday afternoon for about an hour. So it was a quick turnaround, being able to say what was good during the week. With the stories and the points, then they can actually kind of manage the velocity of the work that's going to be done by the team and by multiple teams. So they want to plan on when things will get released. If you're doing things every 2 weeks, then every 2 weeks you should actually deploy something to an environment so that your user and customer can actually use the application. The moving people around. One place I was at, we paired with a pairing partner every day, different person every day. I'll get more into that because that's one of my examples. Other places, moving the people around, I have a lot of database knowledge. So there's times when the pairing partner I'm with doesn't really know the database that well, and I may lead, be the pilot, and then the pairing partner is just the co-pilot. Other places, when you get into like the HTML and the CSS, I know what they are. I'm weak on that. And so basically I try to be a co-pilot so I can learn what my pairing partner is going to teach me or work through as they do changes. So moving people around helps you multiple ways with knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer, and everything on the projects. Designing. When you have a project, you need to have some
architects, designers. I wasn't going to point to you, Mike, but you need to have a simple design so that everyone can actually feel comfortable with it. The system metaphor, that really stands for I should be able to tell you in 2 sentences, 3 sentences, what the application is doing, how you fit in to the application and the work that we're doing. So it's not super complex words. It's not dropping 10 inches of paper on your desk and say, read this documentation in order to understand the application before you even start touching the lines of code. Part of the designs, they use CRC cards. If I can get this right. It's basically the first C is for controllers, so you'd have that on the card, as you have a controller. Down on this side, you'd have the R's, which are responsibilities. So if I have a student, maybe the responsibilities is I'm after names, I'm after grades, and then the second C is collaborators, which would be on this side. If I have a student class, I may need to collaborate with scheduling classes, scheduling rooms, make sure the classes can fit inside the rooms with the right layouts and everything. So that can be used for doing design stuff. Keeping the cards on the simple side and having them posted in an open area, then the whole team can refer to them, make changes, go up and write, or scribble something out, say this needs to get moved over to this card, so that it's always a dynamic design that's going on. I've been in places where user spikes are used, and that's where you're going to have a complicated process, and you're unsure how long it's going to take to do that process. So you don't know if that process is going to be 3 cards, each 8 points each, or it might be 8 cards, a couple of 1-pointers, and then some 3-pointers. But using a spike, you can get a technical resource or 1 or 2 team members to pair together and do some investigations on how long or what is needed to get something done. The last spike I was on, I had to figure out how to implement Impala in a Hadoop environment, using Java to hit data inside Hadoop. It was a 3-point card, and unfortunately I didn't get it done in the first 2-week sprint, and I barely got it done in the second 2-week sprint. So that should have been a spike, because the big spike was security. And basically, once we figured out security was the problem, the spike was, well, we need to request certain security items. And the security team always took 3 days to get something done. And then they'd come back and it's like, okay, now I can try this. No, they set it up wrong, I need a change. Well, the change on the security team might take a day. So if I put a change in today, I may not get it until tomorrow. So that just expands the time to get something done. So, but doing a spike, once I figured that out, I could actually teach how to do that call to other team members on my team, as well as to other teams that were on the floor that were going to be doing that as well. So the spike I spent 4 weeks doing the work was pretty good, because other teams did not have to fight all the troubles that I had. It's like, you need to go do this, you need to request the security, you need to set this up, secure your credentials, and figure out what data you want to call in to get that retrieved. Here's the MVP. Keep your functionality to a minimum, and refactor is needed. So I'm going to talk about both of those together. MVP is, you only want the bare minimum, because in the Agile world, in the extreme programming world, you want to work on something that gets something done for the story. You may go, well, I want to really do the story, but I want to kind of silver plate it. so I want to add something else to make it nicer. Well, that wasn't the ask of the story. Now, I've seen some developers do that type of work as a refactor. And one of the developers, he would finish the program changes basically in a day, but he spent the next 2 days refactoring it left, right, and center, and upside down, and inside out. And basically, he kind of went back to what he finished 2 days before. So you need to refactor as needed, but don't spend a lot of time, because now a one-point story that should have been there really took 3 days, and we were expecting a one-point story to be done in 1 day, maybe 2 days. So in extreme programming, this kind of covers the coding section, and the customer being available, I will tell you from experience, that is critical. One place I was at, the product owner, the customer, sat among us just in the next table over. It was open, so she could hear some things, and occasionally she would like lean back and say, hey guys, you might want to look at this area of the application, because it does, I think, what the story that you're working on needs to get done. Other times, it's like we had some questions, we weren't sure about the story. Well, she wrote the stories. And so we could actually walk over to her desk, her table, and ask questions. And we always did it in pairs, so both the pairs heard what was said, so that we had a clear understanding when we went back to our workstation, and we could actually work on the story. You should always have some good coding standards. Camel case, uppercase, lowercase, variables, class names, service names, just so that it kind of goes with that system metaphor of being able to identify, oh, I'm looking at this code, here's a student service. Well, I know that that's going to ultimately get down to this student data from the database. So just by reading the name, I know what that is. They did unit tests first, which is really the TDD process. I've tried it. I have kind of fallen in love with it, and in some places I've had my hands slapped a couple of times where I went and started looking at code, and the pairing partner came back from getting coffee and he goes, no, go find the tests first that we can clone for this story and set up a failing test before you can actually go to the code. So the pairing partner kept me in line until I learned after about 2 weeks of hand slapping that I shouldn't do that, and I should go straight to the test and do that. The kind of the right-hand column, integration, integrate the code, have a dedicated integration computer, and integrate often. Those all came from the XP documentation I was looking at. So what that really implies is if we finished our code, can we actually deploy it into the CI/CD, the continuous integration, continuous deployment environment? Can we actually get it to work, to pass the test, and therefore get deployed to a user acceptance test environment, a system integration test environment, so that our customer can actually test drive it and go, yeah, you did what we asked in the story, and therefore we can accept the story, and that work is happy. We're happy with that. It may not necessarily be a dedicated computer, because back in '96 it was probably a dedicated computer sitting someplace. But these days it's usually a web environment that people can just hit from their own workstations. And coding, the collective ownership. I mean, the code that I write is just one piece of code written by other developers on the team. But you need to have everyone on the team take ownership of the code. Because as you work different stories, you may work in this code today, and then you go work in some other place and then some other place, and then you're back into this original code for a new story. So you always want to leave the code in good shape because you never know when you're going to be back into it. But you also want it to be in good shape for your other pairing partners that come along to work in that code. So in the extreme programming testing environment, you want to have unit tests. You've probably heard about unit tests all over the place, TDD. However you do it, having tests is very important. And I've got some good examples of how the tests actually become critical to getting good work done out of developers. If you have a bug, I picked up a story one time and it was a bug, a true bug. But it was only a bug if the moon was blue and it was in quarter moon shape and it was the first 5 business days of the month and you put in a value higher than a particular number and, oh, by the way, you were trying to find some data in the database that wasn't actually there. Then you had a bug. But by having a test with all those conditions and it failed, I knew that, okay, we need to go change the real code to get this test to pass. So by doing kind of the testing first and having the unit test, if that condition ever came up, you know, hey, we have a test for that. If it gets broken in the future, that test hopefully will fail again. And therefore the code won't get deployed to the various environments. Part of testing, you've got user acceptance tests. One place I was at, the product owners, the stories were written such that there was an acceptance test verbiage in the story. That was kind of okay for us because we used it. But it was really for once the code had been finished and got deployed out in the CI/CD pipeline, the end users could actually go hit the website and look at that text for that story and go, yes, the code is doing what we asked for in the story. Being at the code level, we had other things in the story that we knew it was working or not working. But that acceptance test was really written for an end user. May not have been the product owner that sat in our area that did testing. I know at some point they had like 4 or 5 people that they brought together every 2 or 3 weeks to do massive testing. And so the text in those stories were really written for them and not really for the developers. Okay, I would say ask questions at any time. If I trigger a question, just go ahead and ask it. So this is from the Extreme Programming website, which is where I got a lot of the preceding information. So kind of, you had a lot of text on the different slides. Apologize for that. Here we got a nice picture. And it basically is kind of wrapping up a lot of those pieces that I talked about before. So you end up with the user stories as being your starting point. You have the testing scenarios for the acceptance test. That's where the users actually would have reading those texts to figure out if the code did what it was supposed to do. You got your release planning, how many stories, which stories are we going to handle first in this 2-week sprint or 1-week sprint, and get the work done. The iteration is you always have that cycle coming back to your code. By doing the MVP, you can actually get small pieces of code out, and then the end user goes, oh, we really like this. One example is if you hit a button, there was a JSON call to go do database stuff and then bring data back. Depending on how much data there was, it sat and sat. There was no indication on the screen that something was being done. And they were trying to click other things, and it just wasn't working. So they wanted a GIF and kind of dim the screen a bit to show that work is being done. The end users found that. They liked it. They liked it so much that I think the next week we had like 15 stories to put it on 20 different pages. So that MVP, you'd think that a little spinning GIF might not be a good feature, but it made a whole lot of sense for the users of that application, because they wanted to know that, hey, I've clicked this, and oh my gosh, it takes like 2 minutes for this to come back. Or, you know, it's real quick, because one place that they wanted us to put it, we put it. And they actually questioned us, it's not there. It's like, yes, it's there. It's just too fast that we don't know what data causes that to be slow enough to get shown on the screen. But we knew it was there.
Well, I know one website where I wish it did have spinning thingies.
Yeah, because you don't know if it's done. You don't know if you can actually click on something else, or it will let you click on something, and lo and behold, when it comes back, it'll do that click. But you may not want it to do that click based on the data that you see back, but you've already clicked on that button. And it's
Yeah.
like, now it's going to go off and do something that you didn't really want it to do. And you may have to go back and actually wait for it to go and retrieve that data again before you figure out, I don't want to click that button. I want to click this button over here. So yeah, I've seen some sites where I like that too.
Well, it's simply slow enough that I wish it would let me know that it's working on it, and not that I was clicking it somehow.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought I clicked it, did I?
New iterations, release things. You got your spike down here, so that, you know, as I said, you work on a spike or have a couple of people work on the spike so that they can go, okay, this big story, we need to break it up into like 5 little stories in this sequence with these following steps so that the developers can tackle them. Maybe two of the first stories can be done in parallel, but then you get those done, then the next 3 stories have to be done in sequence and can't be done at the same time by multiple members of the team.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Before you were talking about how XP kind of limits the number of meetings and you're not stuck in meetings all day. I was out for the very beginning of this, so you may have already covered it, but the things like writing user stories, splitting them up, deciding what goes into your next iteration, are those meetings as well, like they would be in Scrum or Agile?
So the one place that I was at, the product owners wrote the stories, but then we would come together as a team, and I think it was limited to an hour, and we would go through the stories, and the nice thing is those stories were written pretty small. So it was like 1 point, 1 point, 1 point, 1 point, 1 point. It's like, oh, this one we think is a 2-pointer. I think when I was there, I saw like 6 stories that were 2-pointers. All the other ones were 1-pointers. But yeah, we had some of those meetings. Not very often. I think out of 10 weeks, I was in maybe 3 of those meetings.
So Agile might be a little different in that regard.
Right now, I can speak from a safe process. You're laughing already.
I hate safe. Sorry.
Right there with you. We had like 2 full days of planning, and literally those are the worst 2 days every 10 weeks for that environment, that engagement that I was at. And then you'd have a meeting every 2 weeks, because it was 2-week sprints. And then, yeah, there was a lot of planning done. Sometimes that was a half day. So
in this, you really have another role that's able to get those stories prepped enough so you don't have constant meetings on what requirements are.
Correct. One customer we were at, we had 3-week sprints. We finished on a Tuesday, we would go to the customer, do a demo, but then we'd be right back there on Wednesday morning to do planning. So that was more agile process, Scrum process. But that planning, the first, and we only did that every 3 weeks. So we didn't do it every week. And we tried to plan enough so that we had enough stories. If we were really good and got through a lot of stories, then we could have extra stories in the pipeline to go. We just pick the next story and work those. The nice thing about some of those meetings is that based on what got done in that 3-week sprint, when we got to planning, we would start going through the stories and the customer would go, oh, we don't need that anymore, based on what we saw in the demo. Well, we don't need this one. This one we still need, but we now need to change it because of something that we did in the code. So yeah, it's not like you have a meeting every day or a standing meeting every week. But it just really depends on your sprint size. Is it 1 week, 3 weeks, or even 4 weeks? Your meetings can probably spread out. Your architects that do the planning and maybe help with the stories can go, well, I think this story is going to be a 3-pointer. And this story might be a 5-pointer. But they want the team to participate and help vote planning poker and do the points of the stories. Because they may surprise the architect and someone will say, well, we think this is a 3-point story, and the architect goes, really? I think it's a 5-point story. And then they can have that discussion, and maybe the architect didn't document some things in the story, and it's like, oh, but now if you add that in, yeah, it's a 5-point story.
Or one versus a 20, the architect doesn't know the intricacies of something, or vice versa.
Yeah. Did that answer that?
Yes.
Okay. So we kind of moved from 1996 up to about 2001. There was a meeting for Agile software development. The website that I pulled this from, it's down at the bottom there, actually lists these people. And if you can remember, I think Kent Beck, Schwaber, maybe Martin, and Jeffries was on that other list from the 1996 Extreme Program. So they kind of like reiterated, processed what Agile software is to kind of bring it up to date. Five years later, 6 years later. If you've been to this meeting, this kind of gets shown several times, so I won't spend a lot of time, but basically what's on the left is basically more important than what's on the right, even though what's on the right has value and sometimes needs to be done. So in tying this back to the XP process, individuals and interactions. Well, that's the team, that's your pairing partners, that's your product owners sitting among you. It's in an open environment. So having the individuals and the interactions, you can actually get better response feedback and be able to do things to what is expected from the customer or the end user. Working software, that's really the MVP, a minimal viable product. Get something out in front of the customer. Let them play with it hands-on in a non-production environment. And then they can actually do feedback and go, well, we don't like this, we need this taken out. Or, we kind of like this, let's put it all over the place. In that customer collaboration, being able to actively be with the customer, get that feedback, ask the questions. Sometimes I've asked questions and it's like, oh, don't really know. We'll have to go do some investigation and get back to you. So sometimes the thought process of the customer, the end user, they may be thinking, we want to do A, B, C, and in reality they go, well, we need to do A and B, and then we need to do K and J in order to get to where we want to go. But they didn't know that when they first kind of started out some of the stories and stuff. So that collaboration is basically a team. The team succeeds, the company succeeds as well. And being able to respond to changes. I'm an old mainframer. I did waterfall back in the 80s. I remember doing change requests that took 2 weeks to get approved or disapproved, multiple revisions on a change request. When these days it's like, now I'm going to go ask the product owner a question and I'll get an answer. And I don't have to write documentation. I don't have to write a request. I don't have to get the budget approved for this change because it's going to take me another day. Things are so much better these days. So, kind of covered XP, extreme programming, a little bit of the Agile. So I've listed a couple other Agile methods up here. XP, Scrum, the Kanban, the Lean. All of these methodologies, and ... is for whatever else you want to fill in there that I may not know about today. Pair programming can actually be used across all of these. It's really a matter of pairing with someone to get better results. So, this might be another one about extreme programming. So this, I asked Mark Windholtz, because he presented this at Cincy Deliver this past summer, and he gave me the authorization to go ahead and include this. So if we look at this, and you see the boxes like under customer, and there's nothing in red. So that means that these days a lot of this stuff is being done in our environments. So you have small releases, you got your planning game, which goes back to the multiple meetings, being able to plan correctly with the customer, having the customer on site or very close that you can go and ask questions and get answers immediately rather than having to schedule a meeting or write a request. Under the team column, the continuous integration, I've seen a lot of having helped stand up a continuous integration environment in one place, use it in multiple places. It's always good that that's being done more and more because it's become very important that if you can't build your code, test it, run the tests, and then deploy it, how are you going to get the code out to your customers? I mean, if you don't do that, you just can't get your code out. The sustainable pace, again, don't burn out the teams, team members and stuff. I'll jump down to the collective ownership and the open workspace. I've said a lot about both of those. Under the engineering column, programming column, the test first. These days, there's more and more people doing TDD, writing a test first before they actually write the code or correct the code, and then having good coding standards. So the boxes in red is what Mark has kind of highlighted. He ran the Extreme Programming User Group. Went to a couple of those meetings down at Children's Hospital in 2001, 2002. And he just started a domain-driven design user group. Meets the third Tuesday of the month at Caliberty. So basically doing more design at the team level so that you have more team members aware of the other items, keeping your design simple, continuous design, the refactoring. As I said, I've seen some developers who they'll refactor something and they'll just take an hour or two to refactor them. They're very precise at what they want to do, and they don't spend a lot of time. Other developers, as I said, that one story, they spent 3 days rewriting the code over and over. And the last thing that's in red, which when I was sitting in his presentation, is pair programming. And I've got lots of examples after this about pair programming stuff, but he's not seeing a lot of pair programming being done. So I kind of wanted to bring that out. Again, a nice little picture from the Extreme Programming website. Kind of gets into the cards, and then you pair up. Create your test first, so that you know what needs to be changed, that you can validate what got changed is exactly what needed to get changed. Moving the people around. The nice thing about that is if you move and pair with multiple people, you have vast different experiences in the different people. So some places I've paired, as I said, I'm weak on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. I struggle with that, but I can do it. It just takes me longer. Some of my pairing partners, they offer to be the pilot and actually drive while I kind of learn and follow along what's going on. The other benefit, I've got it listed after this, is that you're teaching your whole team about the whole application. And so the benefit there is that instead of having one or two experts that then get stuck with supporting the application, you can actually have a team of 6 or 8 people to actually do support for the application once it goes live. So that shared ownership extends to being trained on the application because you help write it, you help write different pieces. You may have been in the same code multiple times. You have the continuous integration on this side, making sure that all the tests pass, and then making sure the acceptance tests are passed by the end user and everything. Yeah.
I'm curious on your opinion of pair programming. Is it essential for extreme programming, or can you still do justice to extreme programming without pairing?
You can obviously not do pair programming. So one of the examples that I have after this kind of points out where pair programming would have helped me. There's times where, and I do have a bad example where pair programming kind of went wrong and it didn't work out. But I've done it at like 3-4 different customers, and so I've seen more benefit. So one customer that I was at this year is what prompted me to actually work on this talk. Because, and I want to wait till I get to the example, but that experience woke my eyes up because they did pair programming a whole lot different than what I had done in the past. So it's not, you need to do pair programming. You should really do tests. That I would agree on. But pair programming, leave it up to the different companies, teams, and individuals. You may find that you've got maybe 1 or 2 teammates on your team that pair programming may work, and you may try it. Try it for a morning. Try it for a day or something. I've got one example where it was kind of ad hoc, and I'll go through that. But it's not you don't need to do it, and that's why there's a red box around pair programming on Mark's slide here. Is that he's seeing that there's not a lot of people who are really trying it or using it. I think some people who try it and have good success, they want to continue doing it. There's others who try it, it was good, but if you move to another area that doesn't do pair programming, it's like, okay, I'm not going to try to do pair programming with my teammates sitting next to me. maybe I will, maybe I won't. Does that kind of, until I get to actual examples, that's about all what I'll offer for the answer for that. Okay, so quiz time. If you want to participate, it's all volunteer. I'm not going to record anything. How many are at companies that are doing pair programming, whether it's one team, multiple teams, or whatever? Okay, 4, I'll say 5. Okay, so if you're doing pair programming, how many are on teams that do it? And when I kind of ask this question, the whole team is pair programming. You know, whether it's you're always sitting next to John, and it's John and I doing the pair programming every day, or that you rotate around. It doesn't matter. Just one, okay. One, and then for the developers in the room, how many who have actually done pair programming, even if you just tried it once? Some new hands and stuff. Okay, cool, okay. Thanks for the answers. So, kind of here on out, I've got different examples of pair programming. Good and bad. So, if you have one developer and you're sitting at a computer, you've got one keyboard, one mouse, and one screen. And I'm a member of a team, and I'm going to pick up a story. I'm going to work it on my own. Depending on your standards for your teams, no one may look at my code. No one may review it. You may have a standard of before code is actually pushed into the CI/CD pipeline, the code actually needs to get reviewed by at least one other person, maybe 2 other people, so that what you worked on is kind of reviewed and approved to go forward towards production. Testing. So in this environment, I may not write tests. I may just go, okay, I'm making a change. I'll drive the website once I'm done with my code changes and go, yeah, that seems to work. Now, I may not realize that I just happen to choose the correct path on that page and everything works. If I choose this path and then choose this path over here, it may fail. So you kind of want to, that's why having different unit tests can help you out in validating the code changes. So, back in 2013, I was in this environment. I was a member of a team of 6 to 8 people. I picked up a story off of the queue. You know, we picked the next story that's at the top of the list to work it. So my teammate sitting next to me goes, oh, I've worked on something similar to that just 3 days ago. You need to do ABC. It's like, okay, I just do ABC and I'm going to be done with this. So I wrote a test for the conditions. It failed, good thing. I then changed the code and it passed. However, when I ran all the unit tests, I had 22 failing tests, and they were all in the same class that I made code changes to. It's like, obviously I didn't do something right. So my teammate grabbed my laptop. You need to really do XYZ, my mistake. Go do XYZ.
Same teammate?
Same teammate. Yes. And it's like, okay. Well, go do that. So I reverted the code changes. I kept my test. That test didn't fail because I didn't have any code in there. And I did XYZ code. So I'm now nearing the end of day 1. I thought I was done around lunchtime, a little after lunch. No, I undo stuff, put the new code in. So when I ran all the other tests, and at that time there was about 1,800 tests, they all passed. So that was one reason of having lots of tests is that you could change code in one area of the application, and because you have unit tests that cover different areas of the application, when I made that change, I basically was impacting other methods inside that class that basically shot myself in the foot because I had 22 failing tests, and obviously didn't really work right. Although the tests I had passed, not a good indication, but having multiple tests is really good. So if I had paired with that teammate and we had a pilot and a co-pilot where one of us drove the keyboard and the mouse and the other one would stand or sit and go, yeah, you need to do this, and oh, what about that? And then maybe switch off, and then that person would be the pilot, do the coding, and I would actually sit here and go, well, what about that? Or have we thought about this type of process? So pairing in this situation probably would have been good, which probably means we would have figured out we needed to do X, Y, Z first and not have to change the original change I put in. So this gets into two developers, one developer here, one developer here. We've got one screen, one keyboard, one mouse. So you end up with, here, you write the code. You write the code, and then I'll write the tests, and then maybe I'll write the next test, and then you can write the code. So you're passing the keyboard, maybe moving the monitor sideways, upside down, or whatever, passing the mouse back and forth. But being paired up, you've got a pilot, you've got a co-pilot. Doesn't matter who's what. You should rotate them on a regular basis. So, way back in 2009, I had following pairing experience. We didn't pair at this place that I was at. And we were there was 4 cubes and we had our backs to each other. And the DBA in one of the corners cubes says to the customer, I'll start the stored procedure at 6 o'clock tonight and it should finish between 2 and 3 in the morning. And at the same time, I turned around, the guy in the CAD corner turned around, and we were looking at each other, and we're trying to figure out who's going to pick their mouth off the floor first. And we were like, the stored procedure in this environment that takes 8.5 hours to run at night, when there's less things on the system. It's like, oh my gosh, not a good thing. So we got access to the stored procedure, and we looked at it really quick. And so we went to the manager of our team and said, do you mind if we pair together, today, and it was Thursday morning already, and see how far we can get with this process? Because this was going to be executed 4 to 5 times a week for a month for the conversion from SQL Server to Oracle. And so this running at 8+ hours was not really acceptable. So we got the green light, and we went to his cube. He had a keyboard, he had a mouse, he had a monitor, and he drove in the morning, and when we got back from lunch, he goes, I had a car accident 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and my left eye gets strenuous, or it strains after long periods at the terminal. Would you mind driving the rest of the day? I was like, okay. So I got the keyboard, I got the mouse, and it's like, can we move the monitor, because I got a glare and I can't see like the top third corner of the monitor. So we kind of shifted the monitor so that it's visible. So we worked Thursday afternoon, and by Friday afternoon, we had done enough coding on that stored procedure to get it down to like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, depending on what tests we were actually running for that code. And so we thought we had good success, and we did have good success, because when we ran it in production at 6 in the morning, the longest one, there was one day it finished at 6:35. Other days it was 6:20, 6:25, maybe 6:30 when it was done. The bad part is, when we went back to the manager to say, hey, we got this to actually be productive, someone told us later that, the manager actually wrote the stored procedure originally. It's like, okay. And this, an FYI, if you know stored procedures, he was an Oracle person, and he had cursors. He had a cursor, and inside the cursor was another cursor, and inside that cursor was 15 other cursors.
Oh.
That's good. Oracle, right?
Well, this was SQL Server.
Yes.
But we turned them all into set-based. We still had to have one cursor because we had to output files per customer, and we did that with a cursor. But even with the cursor, 20 to 30 minutes. But basically, with him and I pairing together, we could actually go through the stored procedure, and he goes, well, we need to be aware of this one because this query was a little bit different for our set process, which is why it took us into Friday afternoon. It wasn't just a clear cut, change all the cursors into set-based operations. So that was a good experience. Unfortunately, in the 2 years and 9 months I was there, this was the only pairing experience I had. So we didn't do it afterwards, and it wasn't really done before then. So here's my example of a poor pair programming experience that I had. So 2017, we had to learn Scala to go after Hadoop data. So it was new to everybody. It was new to the person sitting next to me. So we had a laptop, but we had 2 monitors that the laptop plugged in. But we still had to pass keyboard and mouse back and forth. But for whatever reason, I couldn't get my partner sitting next to me to really pair program with me. I don't know if he kept checking his email, he kept checking his phone, he kind of wasn't too interested. So the next day I was like, let's do it on your computer and I'll come and watch you code. And he really didn't like that either. He probably thought I was reviewing how he coded, I don't know, afraid to show that he didn't know that much. I didn't know that much at that time. So we were both learning, but he didn't want to share the experience, share the coding. So we kind of went back to each individual kind of did their own little coding process on the project. So that's kind of my bad example. This example is the main reason I went for this talk, because there was a computer and there was a keyboard and a mouse, and there was a different keyboard and a different mouse, and I don't have another monitor, but there was another monitor, and they were basically tied to each other, and we could each type, we could each move the mouse. The nice thing is that the computer, it was a Mac, when both of us were moving the mouse, it basically went 3 times the size and sat there going, come on, Gene, one of you drive. Don't both of you try to move me at the same time. So it was a good environment to go where, I could type on my keyboard, and my pairing partner could type on their keyboard, and they had their own mouse, they had their own monitor. So there was no leaning in, trying to see what was on the monitor and stuff like that. So it was a good experience, because those monitors, 24 inch, 27 inch monitors, They were big monitors. So we worked as a team. So at one point, I think there were 12 developers on the team, so there were 6 pairs. The pairing was really a team effort. They wanted everyone to switch off and on about every 10, 20 minutes so that you just didn't get pigeonholed into doing one thing all the time, which was really good. And we always wrote tests, and a lot of times it's like, well, do you want to start today? Yeah, I'll start. Okay, so what do you want me to do? Oh, you want me to write the test? Okay, so I'll find the test, I'll add the code, and it's like, run the test, and it fails. And then parent and partner would go, okay, I'll go change the code to make sure that that test passes, and then we're done. You can run all the tests. I think they had like 3,000 tests. You can run all the tests, which took 14 minutes sometimes to run. You can run all the tests, make sure that we didn't mess anything else up in the application. So the stories were very small. These were the one-point stories. Example of a one-point story. You got a screen, a web page. You got 3 fields, 3 input fields at the top. There were kind of drop-downs, but not drop-downs. One kind of opened up a little window that you could scroll to choose data. The other ones were more proper drop-downs. But that 4th field that they want added was, it needs to look like the drop-down list that's on this page over here, bring it over here, and make all 4 of them the same. So, you know, we're working the story. It's a lot of HTML and JavaScript, so it's okay. So we got done with that. And I said, the partner goes, I think we're done. And I go, what do we put into the list? And it's like, it's not in the story. It's another story. I go, what? So yeah, all we were supposed to do was put that field on page. It was empty. There was nothing to select. There was no action for that unknown value or non-selected value to be applied. The next story that I think we worked on as well, populated with this list of data from this query, and then, oh, by the way, use the other 3 values on the queries. Well, the queries were already there, so we just had to say, well, if we have a value here, we're going to add an AND clause. So it was pretty easy to do that. But that's how small the stories were. So one-point stories, very unique in that some days you'd have one story done by the team. There were some days that my partner and I, we got through 4 stories. Now, I'll ask the question before someone else asks it. What happens when you get to the end of the day and it's like, we're not done. What do you want to do? At that point, we had a conversation between the pair and go, do you want to carry it tomorrow? Or do you want me to carry it tomorrow? And when I first joined the team, it's like, I don't have the knowledge to really carry this on my own. I said, I'll pass to you. But after a couple of weeks, I had that experience, and it's like, well, I'll carry it tomorrow. So what that meant is I was going to be at this computer tomorrow, and I was going to get a new partner. And that partner and I would finish that story in maybe 2 hours, 3 hours. And it's like, okay, then we just grab the next story. But that's how the partners can help each other, because the partner that joined me had a little more experience. So they were able to actually provide a little more details and help get the story done faster. So we always did tests. When you're writing the code in pairs, one is really reviewing what the other one is writing. So your code review is kind of being done at the same time. Okay, so, yep, that was earlier this year. Switched every day, one-point stories. We should have gone through this one. Product owners sat among us so we could ask questions. The nice thing about this area, they had a big TV screen on the side of the room that showed the CI/CD pipeline. So you could tell that, oh, we just deployed, we're waiting for this to finish. If it's like, okay, we're ready to deploy, it's like, oh, someone's already just done a deploy, we need to let that finish, get deployed, and then we can actually push our change. So it's kind of a gateway, but it was out in the open area, open environment. So it was always a good thing to look at. And believe it or not, I did remote pairing a couple of times on this team. They had a couple of consultants from out of town. They always went back to their town Thursday night, and if I got paired with one of them on Friday. So I was at the computer, I authorized him to connect to the computer, put my headset in, and basically we just talked over the computer all day long, did code changes. Here we go, let me drive a bit, because I think I know what we need to do here. It's like, okay, you drive, and I just like sat back and would go, well, what about that? And you know, line number 22 needs to be looked at. It's like, okay. So you can do remote pairing as well. This place did ping pong in the middle of the morning and in the middle of the afternoon. Basically, stop work, go play 3 games of ping pong. It was really hard for me to experience that and put that in line with getting the job done. But it was really good because it was a physical break. You didn't have the computer. Nobody talked about the code over the game of ping pong. We played to 11 points won. But it was a good break. And after 2 or 3 weeks, it was like, yeah, let's go play ping pong while we're waiting for a build to finish. So it was always a good break, good exercise, a good mental break. So costs, put everything up. Some have said pair programming is expensive. I've got 2 people working on the same code at the same time, and therefore it costs me twice as much to get that story done. And it's like, well, your QA staff might not necessarily be needed because we're doing tests. We're also doing tests as we got code changed. You get better quality of the code because you got a review being done at the same time. And your costs can say, well, if we pair program and we rotate everybody through pairing, then everybody kind of knows the application. They may know different parts different well, but you save on cross-training the staff. So that's a cost benefit as well. So better design. As I said, I'm a database heavy guy, so there's some stories where my driver pairing would go, can you work on the query for this story because I'm not sure what to do. And I said, well, I can do that, and I'll walk you through what I'm doing so that you get familiar with that code, the database code.
And Keith,
Yes.
the other consideration to keep in mind when people are complaining about the cost, the perceived extra cost, programming is not a typing skill, it's a thinking skill.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter how many words per minute you can type. Actually, the faster you type, probably the worse you'll do.
I agree with that.
So the fact that you've got 2 people looking and thinking about the code at the same time is actually much more cost efficient.
Yeah. I mean, you get a better design because you got different experience. You're teaching people, and then the other thing is that when you kind of dedicate yourself to pair programming, cell phones are usually silent, and you have less interruptions. So that one place I was at, I don't think I ever heard a cell phone going off during programming time. Lunchtime was a different question because at lunchtime, lunch was from 12 to 1 for everybody. Eat lunch, talk about the reds, the weather, how hot it was on some days. The AC needed to be turned up because it was getting closer to the summertime. So you got good communications between your members. So switching the driver, if you got junior people or inexperienced people, the reason I have both of those is that your junior person might be someone right out of a code camp, 2 years of experience, 3 years. And inexperienced, usually when I go to a customer, I'm inexperienced. I have not been working with the code. Those other team members have been working with that code for like the last three months or the last 6 months. So I was inexperienced at that point. In other places, since my database knowledge, I was an experienced member at the database knowledge side. So I actually did some little training to different people on the team as to how to do the queries. A lot of times they would come and ask me questions. They wanted me to like sit at the computer and code, and I said, no, I'm going to walk you through it because it's pointless. You're not going to learn how to do the code if I sit there and type real fast. The other thing is you don't want to work alone when you're in the pairing environment because if you've changed the code, your pairing partner hasn't been there to review it, to look at it, to provide input. Is the pizza here?
I have,
Oh, okay.
they are running late because of all of
Okay. So, in order for the success, as I said, doing breaks from pair programming, whether that's a bathroom break, a ping pong break, just a break for people to make phone calls, return phone calls that have piled up on their check emails, whatever. Sharing the knowledge of the application is important when you're pairing as well. It's just not the coding. It's what does the application do? I've got banking experience and accounting background in my background. So in systems that dealt with the GL, General Ledger, I could actually provide a lot of good input that some of those people did not know about. If you're doing a shopping cart on a website and orders, someone may know more about that, about, 10% discount is taken after tax or pre-tax. That type of knowledge is good to be shared when you pair program. So pair programming, remember, it's a team effort, it's a joint effort. There's times when whether you're the driver and you're doing the typing or you're the co-pilot and just looking at the screen and making input and stuff. Be aware of there's a lot of conversations going on between you and your partner, and be aware that sometimes they need to talk longer than you may think. So don't interrupt them, let them get their thought out and go, until that last sentence I thought I was going to respond this way, but with that last sentence I don't need to respond, I'll just agree and go, yeah, that makes sense. As I said, there was times when I was a student and I was learning some more HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then there was times when I was like teaching SQL, query processes, and stuff like that. So basically, talk to each other. Here's the code. It's kind of hard to find someone who knows all levels of that, and that are really considered experts in all levels. I'm really good at the database level. I'm okay in the middle level, C# or Java, I do both. And I have done some Scala. I won't say I'm an expert, but I can hold my own. But the HTML, the CSS, there's others who like the front end and they don't even want to get into the database somehow. So, share your success. You finish a story. All right, a little fist bump or a high five or something. And then also bring that up in the retros. over the week or 3 weeks, we got through a lot of stories and stuff like that. So do the celebrations. Be aware of it's a team effort. So you want everyone to share in the success. And if you have troubles, you want to learn from the troubles. Whether that's code issues, database issues, or application issues. I think one time the application was retrieving all the data, and then it was going row by row in memory to actually figure something out, a where condition or something. And it's like, if we change the query, it'll all be done in the database, and the data coming back will be what we need, and we don't need to loop through 50,000 records of data. So, learn from the troubles. And the one place I was at this year, a lot of times, the pairing partners, we held a mini retro. How was the day? And do be honest. There were times that I would go, I think I was a little slow because I was trying to learn the application, so I may have caused us to get through 2 stories instead of 3 stories. Other times, my pairing partner kind of took over the driving, and she went really, really fast. And it's like, wow. So when we kind of did a little retro, it's like, I kind of followed what you were doing at speed through the last couple of hours. And she's like, well, I wanted to make sure we finished the story before the end of the day. And it's like, okay, I understand that, and we did finish the story. But just that honest conversation can help the environment. It helps your teammates learn where you stand in your knowledge level, your experience level, so that other team members can actually be comfortable working with you. Yes. I hate putting up the good hygiene. Fortunately, I've never had issues. I've heard stories where someone had really bad BO, and it actually, I think, ended up in HR's hands to get the smell addressed. But when especially if you're working on one computer, one keyboard, one mouse, you want to basically not spread germs, be aware of, having clean hands. Don't eat at the terminal and then turn around and smear ketchup on the mouse or something like that. And if you're only on one monitor and you're bleeding in, you be aware of the BO stuff as well as bad breath and stuff. Eating garlic at lunchtime might be a bad thing. And then also, as I said, successes. Success is at the pairing level, but your pairs are members of teams, so your team can show good success. And then you got multiple teams that results in good company success as well. Okay, so I got this question here. So, who might be the first people to do pairing in the computer technology era? So, any guess before I put 2 pictures up?
Steve Jobs and Bill Gates.
Good, but probably about 150 years too late.
Lovelace.
Pardon?
Lovelace.
Yes, Lovelace. And
Forget the other one.
Babbage, I think.
who?
Babbage?
Babbage, yes. So Ada Lovelace did a lot of work with some of the Babbage machines, and obviously she had to learn how to, I think they were like boards or something, like a weaving loom, and so she had to know how to shape them or put the holes in them so that they would actually work for the engine that he did. And this is basically off of a PDF from the church that Ada Lovelace is actually buried at, which is the same place that Byron, the poet, is buried as well. And with that, I am done. But pizza may not be here. Any questions or any input? Does anybody want to share any of the experiences, good programming, pairing? How many want to go and try? Yeah.
Another question related to pairing. So there's some teams practice a thing called mob programming. Do you have any experience with that?
I do not. That's where you have like 3 or 4 people huddled around.
Like the whole team is doing one thing.
The whole team is doing it. So it's kind of on a projector
Yeah.
so that everyone can see. And then you have like one driver.
Yeah.
You need to rotate through. So Woody Zoll created that. He's a friend of mine. I've spoken to him about it, and I'm actually getting up because we're getting ready for announcements for pizza, but it works for some, not for others. Like, I'm a big fan of the pair programming paradigm, and the story you might want to add into this is, have you ever been in a situation where you're working on something, you call somebody over and say, hey, Eric, can you take a look at this? I'm working on this, and I'm trying to do this, and I'm doing, oh, okay, never mind, Eric, go away. Right? Because you've just talked to the rubber duck, which is how Andy Hunt refers to it. That's pairing, right? Anytime you just call somebody over, it doesn't have to be this formal thing. And quite often, if you try and make it a formal thing, you'll have the bean counters go, what? I'm not paying 2 people to work on 1 keyboard, right? So even if you don't use your other computer, just keep it open. But the mobbing thing, I think works in certain scenarios. I've never actually seen it work. I've been at conferences where they were like doing workshops on it. And like for me, the hardest thing with pairing, I remember the first time I tried it was early in the .NET days, and I was with a really good friend of mine, and he's a godfather to my first child. And we almost got in a fight because of naming conventions. Like he was calling a variable one thing, I'm like, no, that's stupid, call it this, and things like that. So there's things you have to work through. Sorry,
that's
ready, so I jumped in.
Yeah, I mean, I'm done. If there's any questions, I'll stay in here if you have any, if you just want to do something one-on-one talk. Yeah.
How does paired programming look different with 2 experts versus an expert and a newbie?
Crappy. Because the expert's going to fight all day long. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, 2 experts, I mean, they have slightly different work experience and knowledge, even though they're experts. So sometimes one will provide some input that the other one may not know about. I've been coming to user groups since 2000, when this used to be the VV6 user group. I come to these to learn. So, yeah, I'm kind of an expert. I go to Secret Server user group. But as an expert or a knowledgeable person, I don't know everything, and I'll admit that. So, but someone who has this similar experience, you get kind of a synergy sometimes, where you know one will do something like, yeah, oh, I was thinking about that, but you already did that. So you can provide positive feedback on that. As I pointed out, the novice and the inexperienced people with an experienced person, try to not have the experienced person always doing the driving. You know, it's not a typing test. It's not how fast can you type. But I find that people learn if I go to your computer and say, now let's do this. In fact, I did it yesterday remotely with a coworker. He shared his screen. There was a button at the top that says relinquish control or pass control. I said, don't push that button because I'm not going to type it. I want you to type stuff. So it's a way of helping someone learn, even if they struggle and it may take 2 hours, whereas if I did it myself, maybe 45 minutes, you know. Does that kind of answer, or you after a specific answer?
I'm after a specific answer. I found that helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the other thing you might want to consider, and maybe you mentioned this, I'm sorry, I was trying to fix a problem for a customer. But if you are doing pair programming with TDD, have one person write the test and the other person solve the test.
Yes, I did.
You did mention that? Okay, sorry. That was fixed down.
The place place I was at this year, my hands got slapped because I would look at code before anything else. But it was always, you can write the test, and then my pairing partner would write the code, and then it's like, okay, we'll go pick up another story and go, okay, she'll write the test, and then I'll write the code.
That's a good way. That's a great way to get started.
Yeah.
Because there's very clear boundaries, and then you don't get in fights over naming convention. Because within the test, you can name it whatever you want, Keith, and within the code, I'm going to name it my way.
Yeah.